Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on 5 ways to fail AppSec training. My name is Altaz Villani, and I'll be your host for this webinar. I'm the Director of Insights Research here at Security Compass, and my role includes extensive collaboration with industry practitioners, working groups, and standards organizations. The format of today's webinar will be a panel discussion. I will facilitate the discussion, and I invite you in the audience to help us keep this interactive. Please put your thoughts, put your comments either in the chat window or in the Q&A panel. Joining us today is a dynamite panel. We've got folks that have experience in the realm of training, and they all have their opinions and their thoughts about this topic, so it promises to be very interesting. I'd like each one of our panelists to, at this point, please introduce themselves to our audience, and let's do this alphabetically from the top. So Robin, you want to kick it off? Sorry, you're muted if you're talking.
Thank you. It just occurred to me that, the topic of training has some particular relevance to me because this is my 4th company in my lifetime. I've 40 years of experience trying to teach people how to use technology. And I have 2 completely separate master's degrees. The first one was from Lesley College. And when I was doing a master's in education and trying to use technology to teach, especially to reach people who were quote unquote troubled, I had to go all the way to UMass Lowell just to get a lab, just to get an environment where I could bring young adults together to learn how to use technology. And then had to get another master's a full 10 years later, because that's when enterprise tech and Java was taking off. And today, I'm constantly thinking, oh gosh, I need to get another master's because things are changing so fundamentally, so quickly. So it just occurred to me that this is really near and dear to my heart, this topic. I am the president of ISC Squared East Bay. We have the 20th largest, most attended chapter globally, which is interesting because we have the smallest footprint. The East Bay, it ends at the North Bay, the South Bay, Silicon Valley, and San Francisco. So in this very small group, we have 40% women. We have an above average level of diversity and representation. And it's something that I really love, which is to bring training to people. So this is why I know Security Compass. We keep finding the best vendors, best tools, and best teachers to come tackle the big problems in keeping our careers relevant. And after using Security Compass for about 3 years with people over at Cisco, this is where I got a chance to work with what it does. I invited you guys to speak and then, never look back. We've been connected at the hip ever since. So that's me. Nice to meet everybody.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Robin. And Tony, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name's Tony Corrado. I live, as you might be able to guess from my screen background, in the desert southwest of the United States, specifically New Mexico. I am retired out of IBM, and before that, AT&T and a few other places. Much of my time as an architect, most of it, and a lot of focus on security. I've worked on every continent but Antarctica. Active in the security forum as a member of the steering committee at Open Group, which is where I know Altaz and Security Compass from. I had the pleasure of working with him for some time now. I'm an advisor to a couple of open source projects and a board member of one for-profit company. So I'll be taking kind of that perspective in our discussion.
Fabulous. Rob?
Hey, hi guys. I'm Rob Cuddy. I'm a solution architect over at HCL Technologies in the HCL software division. Do a lot of AppSec evangelism as well. Was also, like Tony, with IBM for a very long time. Also worked on every continent except Antarctica. So exactly, got a chance to do a lot of things there. And yeah, this is a topic that's just near and dear to my heart, right? How do we actually educate, train, communicate values, stuff like that? And these days, I'm actually spending a lot of time also working with students. I've got capstone projects with a couple of universities going on this semester, and just always looking at how do we educate in this space, get people excited about it, because the needs are not going away, right? As the cyber landscape goes, all of this pulls in. And so everything from the threat modeling and threat hunting and all of the other things that are going on in there. I'm so excited about where the discussion is going to go.
Sounds good. Ihan, you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Altas. Greetings from the freezing Toronto, everyone. My name is Ihan Tech. I'm the VP of Information Security at Cyber Electra, which is a boutique cybersecurity shop where we provide the cybersecurity services. That includes the kind of just the training and also the technologies as well, right? Very excited to talk about the kind of the security training today, what works and what doesn't, and hoping to kind of just get some interaction from the or the feedback from the kind of just the audience as well, as Altas mentioned. We would like to make this one more interactive because everyone has this kind of just great, the experiences over there. Let's kind of just learn together what are those experiences are.
Absolutely. And taking exactly that cue from what Ihan said, this is where we find ourselves today, right? Developers are burdened with trying to move really fast. And at the same time, they're trying to stay updated with the latest development frameworks, coding paradigms. And there's really honestly very little time to think about security. And developers want help, they want guidance from our security teams because these regulatory and these security requirements are continually changing. If there's any kind of friction between security teams and the devs, inevitably it's going to slow down delivery. When we take a look at the lens of AppSec training in all of this, AppSec training can absolutely provide developers with this low friction guidance that they seek. But it's not something that you just drop in and it works, right? So we've got a lot of AppSec training courses out there. The questions that are emerging now are more about, how do I do this right? What do I watch out for? And that's what this webinar here is really all about. It's to try and get to the operational aspects of e-learning and looking at how we can sort of build that security culture, which is what we're aiming for. So we've got 5 things we want to talk about. We're going to take each one of these in turn, and we're going to invite our panelists to offer their thoughts, their perspectives on this. So the first one is, all right, treat your AppSec training as a one-time event rather than a process. We've got some teams that say, hey, you know what? This is a one-time, one and done, and now voila, we should be able to understand security. And others take the perspective that this needs to be ongoing. It's an investment. It's something that should be ingrained in the culture. So let me just open this up to our panelists. And Ihan, you were the last one to talk in the introduction, so I'm going to pick on you. You want to offer your thoughts on this?
Sure, but before delving into that, Altas, are you working out? You look very fit these days, eh? Okay, don't worry about it, because many people try to get the kind of just to get fit by working out, and they do this every day, right? They go to the gym, or they exercise regularly so that they can get fit, right? I wish there was an easy way to get fit. Just going to the gym just one day per year. That would be an awesome thing for a kind of just lazy guys like myself, right? But alas, please take a good look at me, and I think you can tell that this is not working, right? Just kind of, especially after the New Year kind of resolution, I'm saying that, you know what, I'm gonna kind of work out every day, but it doesn't happen. Anyways, similarly, if you are kind of just providing the training as just one-time event, you are not going to benefit from that kind of just the security training. I can definitely tell, right? So just like the little exercise every day goes away, in keeping you fit, same thing applies for the kind of just the training as well. If you are doing this one just to the kind of just to the one size fits all, or just to the one and done types of activities, then you are not bringing the full value to the table over there, right? Unless your goal is just kind of just to the keeping to the regulatory requirements, kind of just to the or bodies happy, because you know that many regulatory requirements mandate organizations to kind of just to go through or provide the training to the workforce, right? PCI, HIPAA, ISO, they all kind of mandate these kind of just to the needs. But we all know that compliance is one thing, the security is another thing, right? They are not the equal over there.
Yeah, interesting. So Robin, I'm gonna ask you to chime in here. I mean, you work in the GRC space, right?
I have so
So
much to say.
compliance is a part of this. What gives? So your
I
thoughts
have
on this?
so much to say. I'm thinking I make sure I can shut it down in under 90 seconds because I'm not sure I can. I love that analogy. And so just a couple of thoughts. One is education definitely means different things to different people. Sometimes I see companies invest a lot in education, and it can send a lot of emotional miscommunications, and sometimes also real communications, like who gets sent to training, who gets the best training, and people who are floundering and really need to get lower amounts of training that's just in time and helping them to be successful. Instead of getting that just in time enough to be successful, to feel connected, and to sense that investment in them in the enterprise, they're feeling shut out. And you hear them say, like, I'm not important to this org. They sent this other person who's a rock star away for a whole week. That person got this really special training and I did not. I'm not valued. So I think there's a lot of layers to who we train and how we interpret the need for training.
Yeah.
Like I said, how do I shut this down in 90 seconds? The one and done training for compliance, in my opinion, is necessary because it really represents a contract within the organization to say, we expect you to know these things. We expect bare minimum competency in these things. That should not be confused with what it takes to be successful in the work that you're doing. So, they're different. And if you hear somebody saying, oh, we're doing compliance training, therefore our AppSec is good, that is not a good company. That will not be a good product because that is not the kind of training that we're typically required to give.
Yeah,
But
interesting.
it does represent very much a contract. Okay.
Yeah, no, all good, all good. I think I hear Rob dying to get in here. He's humming, hawing, coughing.
No, I mean, I love this because the things that are popping up into my head on this, right, is there is that compliance, right, but that should be the starting point. And the things that make this work are context, right? So putting it in things that matter to the people that are taking the training. And I love the workout analogy, right? Because as soon as it was brought up, I was thinking, well, yeah, you've got diet, you've got hydration, you have all these other pieces. So connecting it to things that then bring value here, it makes me laugh a little bit because I remember days in past where I would go at certain companies and we would take these 1 hour sessions and you would have question and answer before and after, right? So as soon as the webinar was over, you'd get this survey that says, okay, well, how enabled are you now, right? And as if we can move somebody from ground zero to complete competency with a 1 hour session. And so I think that's the same sort of mentality with this kind of one-time event, that all you're doing in that is transferring information, but your training has to key into execution, right? And sort of the last thing I'll say on this is there was a fascinating study done a couple of years ago by Sonatype, where they found that developers that got training that was in context for their job, security focused, they were 5 times more likely to be happy in what they were doing. And so there's definitely this notion of wanting to understand this space a lot better by that audience, but it has to be in context.
Yeah, I recall seeing that survey as well. And you know what, Tony, I haven't forgotten about you. I'd like you to take the lead on this next point here. This is about mandating AppSec training instead of convincing developers about the value of AppSec training. Now, I'm hoping we've got a wide range of opinions about this, right? So, Tony, you want to kind of take it over on this one? Let's kick
Sure.
this off.
So I think the first thing is there is training you have to mandate.
Mhm.
Compliance requirements, sorry, you have to do it. But more important, I think, is a learning culture. And one of the questions, and Rob and I both came out of IBM, and one of the things you had stuck in your face, I guess, is who actually owns your career development? Well, the answer is you do. If you're assuming, and anybody that's at one of the big tech companies, or maybe used to be at one of the big tech companies and isn't anymore, discovered that, assuming this large corporation is going to just take care of you, not really. So you have to own your own career development. And part of that is, rather than me convincing you ought to want training, as a leader or manager, I want to convince you that I will help you, but you own your career development. I can enable it, but I can't own it for you. The other thing, by the way, is training can also absolutely, it was alluded to in the previous topic, be a reward, usually for high performers. And people should get jealous of it. My response to that tends to be, I want to be transparent about how people got selected to go to the Security Compass training event in the British Virgin Islands or something. But that works if you're transparent and you give people a chance to aspire to it and work for it. So to me, it's not about convincing people they ought to take training. It's about convincing them they ought to own their own career, and their management needs to help them. So I'll pause.
Interesting. Robin, do you have some thoughts on this? You'd mentioned earlier that there is a place for mandating certain things. Contractually, you may be obligated to go through this, and it is intended to drive value for the organization. What role does convincing the developer of the value of training, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. I went to school in Belgium and in London, and the education system there is very much, if you show an aptitude, you will be leveled up. And if you don't show an aptitude, we're going to work you sideways and out into areas where we feel you're going to succeed. And when you get to the end, there's no debt. And so I don't have an aversion to people being told you're not demonstrating an aptitude. What I see, though, is people who want to succeed, who are very motivated, come in with different aptitudes. And one of the great values in the United States is that we have this open, free, competitive system. And when you bring people in who have multiple language barriers, or perhaps because of their age, when you say, like a batch file, like Perl, they're like, you mean, the cartoon character Perl? They really, they're just coming in right now.
Yeah.
It's easy to miss people who are going to be creative and really successful. But my feeling is very strong. These things need to be mandated, because it's a leveling moment that says, if you're not able to do this, here's a heads up. Your job requires you to be very comfortable in this space. So if you don't understand this and you can't do this, take this as a cue that you need to go off and do some more self-study or speak to your manager, because this is the bare minimum contract. And I do believe very strongly in that annual event. But if you don't have follow-up, and it becomes a barrier and people just get freaked out and they leave their job, that's another issue. Workforce resources aren't as easy to come by as we all think. Somebody was motivated enough to come to a company and want to work there. That's an opportunity. And that's it. That was not a
Yeah.
clear answer, was it? But
No, it was. You know what? If we peel back the layers a little bit here, right?
Yeah.
We talk about it's important for you. You need to level up. I think there's an element of trying to convince people this is to your benefit, right? And therein lies the motivation of the individual to say, you want to be better. We will help you get better. So, Rob, I want to just, if you could just speak for a couple of minutes on this, because you're dealing with folks that are in academia and you're creating this program. Does this idea come up at all in your discussions about mandating versus convincing? Are they implicitly just motivated to do this on their own? Are they looking for something else? Like, can you share with us?
Sure. And it comes up, I think, in a couple different formats, right? The questions that you'll hear are things like, what certification should I get, right? What are should I go for Security Plus or should I look to CompTIA, right? Like, where do I go? And there's lots of different ones in there. And what it comes back to, I think, just like with the software development itself, right? Developers are very familiar with the idea of a minimum viable product, right? And all of those kinds of things. There's a minimum level in this space that people need to get to. And I think that with students in particular, right, they want to know what that minimum level is and what we need to do around it. And the interesting thing about this, and I do a ton of work with younger students, right? So basically I've been in the junior high to college space now for about the last 6-7 years in all different capacities. And the thing that I find that's really interesting is that whenever you take the approach of trying to make it easier from a standards perspective, right? So we keep lowering the bar. Well, what happens is students will naturally gravitate to wherever the bar is. And so we're actually doing kind of a disservice in a lot of ways when we try to make it easier. What we have to do is lower the barrier to entry without compromising the standards. And I think sometimes we mix those things up a little bit. So here, I think, if you're trying to convince developers, I don't know that developers need to be convinced that they have to be secure. They just don't necessarily understand what it means to be secure, right? And so it's education on what does a secure product really look like, and putting it, again, in a context that makes sense for them. I think about in this space too, Larry Masserone, who some of you may be familiar with, he used to work for Contrast, and he had a really cool program where he discovered that it was actually more beneficial to the organization as a whole if he took a small group of developers and started them with a baseline and drove them to deep maturity, rather than trying to get the entire organization to, say, some arbitrary level 1 or level 2 kind of idea. So that was depth and then breadth across it. But his model was all based on shades of green. So the greener you were for a project, the more secure you were, the better you were. So it wasn't that negative kind of red, yellow model and stuff. So I think some of those kinds of things, keep the bar high, but lower the barrier of entry to what it means to get into that space. And context is king in that for these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ihan, you've been quiet for a while, right? There's something that comes up sometimes in conversations. We're going to withhold this accreditation. We've spoken about this a little bit earlier in our conversation, but I want to peel the layers. I want to go deeper on this one a little bit. We're going to withhold accreditation because the developers will become in demand and they'll move on. So essentially we become an academic institution. We keep training people, they keep leaving. There's a risk to the organization as a result of it. So we're not going to do that, or we don't do that, or we require people to have that accreditation before they come in. All these nuances around AppSec training. You want to talk a little bit about that based on your experience, Ihan?
Sure. Sometimes, not sometimes, but usually I deal with it, the kind of just a security budget, right? And I go to the kind of just the board or kind of the executive team and I say, hey, I need a training. And these are the kind of just the needs for the workforce, right? Sometimes I get the question, okay, what happens if we invest in developing and training them? And what if they leave us, right? And the answer is so kind of just straightforward. What if we don't train them and they stick around? Right? It's a terrible thing, right? We are not training them and they are around over there. So organizations, I think, need to adopt the universal fact that the prevention is better than the cure, right? So you need to be prepared. You need to train your kind of just the development team, right? And many organizations know that if you're not kind of just investing in training, no matter which business you are in, it's a risky business always, right? So they need to think about like the training, security training is a kind of just wearing a seat belt, right? If you are neglecting that one, taking the kind of just while riding the car, then I mean, there are some consequences. Same thing applies for the kind of just the training, security training. If you are not kind of just providing that security training to your workforce, beware some consequences over there that you may not like, right? So balancing act.
Yeah, Tony, you've had an illustrious career, and just kind of looking back now on, just these pearls of wisdom that you might have around withholding accreditation. What are your thoughts? Like, what advice would you give to people?
You can look at what Richard Branson said about, treating your employees and training them and educating them so that they're really valuable to others, and then treating them really well so they don't want to go away. And I think Ihan made a really good point, which is, good Lord, what if you don't help them develop and they stay? I know I've had the experience of working with companies, and just, you'll note there's not a lot of hair left. Tearing some of it out on you people don't have basic understanding of writing secure code, and you want me to include what you do in my product? Not happening. Before I left IBM, I was, at the end of it all, the architecture profession lead for the Americas, which has a fair number of architects. And we pushed them all, partly because we had gates they had to pass through for promotion on certification. If you didn't reach a certification level, you couldn't get promoted, which meant, among other things, it capped how much you could get paid. The other side of that, and I see it, and in the companies I'm advising now, including as a board member, the other side is mentoring and coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Senior people need to understand that's part of the deal too. But going specifically to the point of certification, if what we're worried about is you give people good training and they become well qualified, they'll leave you. What you should understand is they're just looking for an opportunity to leave you.
Yeah, interesting. We have a question that came in here. Can you give us examples of how developer organizations have successfully lowered the barrier of entry for training? I think you had brought this up, Rob, at one point. Any thoughts about this?
Yeah, thinking about it, because I saw that come in a second ago, and simple ones are just really, this goes down to accessibility, right? So one of the trends that I'm seeing now is moving away from these kind of larger, cram everything together, in one session types of training, into short, concise, contextual, either videos or snippets, right, that serve specific purpose. So breaking up some of the things, if you want to teach people about cross-site scripting or dealing with injection or things like that, dealing with just that context and make it short and simple and consumable, that's one way. Involving people in them is another thing, right? And going and taking the expertise that they already have and giving them a way to share that. So whether it's inviting to internal training events, whether it's creating those opportunities for lunch and learns and things like that, but making it so that it's not the same 2 or 3 people over and over and over again trying to do the training, but helping people not only take the training, but now deliver it as well, right? Because we all know, being instructors, that you end up learning just as much, if not more, than your students when you do that. So giving them opportunities to actually put that into practice right away. I think group learning is another way to lower the barrier here. So discussions, tabletop exercises. You and I have talked a ton, right, about gamification with threat modeling and things like that. Those are all great ways to open the opportunities and basically just get people talking, right? They remember what they share more than what you share. So getting them involved helps bring that barrier down. So those are some of the ones just right off the top of my head.
Yeah, sounds good. And the next point here is scope, really. It's about training your developers on everything, right? And we spoke earlier about context. I think, Robin, you brought this up. So I'm going to ask you to respond to this, but sometimes it almost feels like there's so much we need to know, everything. We just need them to know everything at the end of the day. And so it can become overwhelming at times. So Robin, you want to take this on?
Oh, I would love to. So as you know, I've said a few times, in some ways, training is a contract to make people convince us that they know what the larger organization does. So for example, if you don't understand SAST, IAST, DAST, RASP, if you don't know what those things are, then you might not understand how to interoperate with a critical team. Sorry. Apologies. You might not know how to interact with critical teams in the entire chain. So, but getting to lowering the bar for entry, because I just wanted to come back to that. I see a lot of people who have difficulty with the pace and the multifaceted nature of understanding what they're doing. They really, conceptually, they understand Agile, but they can't separate themselves to understanding why the particular thing that they're doing is going to fit into a larger picture. So I think a lot of training is helping people to understand how to do what they're required to do very well, but also to have a deep appreciation for what came before them and the extended tree around them. So I'm going to come back to using problems that I initially discussed in the Security Compass library. Working with people who were defining the barrier to their success and saying, well, let's go back to that problem statement. Let's look at all the tags in the problem statement, and let's be very convinced that we know the issue that you see as a stopper. Is the problem related to a compliance requirement or not? Or is this really something that needs to be brought back to the design of your test modeling? So for me, everybody is good at something and lousy at a lot of other things. And if you can get people to be at least average to understand all the other things, they can then, run forward really fast doing their part. It used to be that everybody needed to know how to make the entire violin, from beginning to end. You needed to be able to build the whole bicycle. You needed to be able to build the whole car. That really doesn't exist nowadays. And it can be a challenge for me working with people who are my contemporaries, people born in the 60s, my contemporaries, to get them to let go of that. And sometimes the training experience or the interface that they're using is the vehicle that I need to help them to realize they can be successful, they can be plugged in. It isn't so much that the barrier to entry is a lower bar, but that they understand that what they're doing is valuable, and they can see how to break apart what they don't know to get the help that they need. Anyway.
Yeah. So Rob, you're doing stuff with students now, and this kind of touches on specialization, but at the same time, you need a foundational sort of structure on which to build upon. How do you balance this idea of training them on everything and then allowing them at the same time to specialize in a role that they want to get into? Are you running into this type of stuff?
A
You there,
little,
Rob?
yeah.
Okay,
Can you
we'll
hear me
wait for Rob. Sorry.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, all good.
Perfect, because I was cutting in and out, so I'm not sure if that's where that's coming in, but there is you see it a lot, right? And again, I kind of mentioned it with the what certification do I get bit in there, but I think it's more nowadays on skill and understanding and problem solving and some of those things that really start to come in, and being able to take understanding in one area and connect it to others, right? So when you're talking about from the training bit, I think it's great to kind of say, okay, well, here's the immediate context, but here's these other places where it could connect. And I'll give you an example, right? For us in the AppSec space in particular, we're going to start running into a lot of challenges around data privacy and data security, simply because so much of that is processed through applications. And we're seeing regulations now that are changing and being much more specific on software development types of terms in the regulation. If you want to see a really good example of this, NYDFS is and their cybersecurity regulation, which I think it's 525 CR, if I remember right. But basically, there are now bullet lists of about 18 or 19 items, page 5 or 6 of the latest version of that, where they call out, things like continuous delivery and the software development paradigm and, identity management. And so we're going to see more and more of that, right? President Biden coming out with executive orders specific to supply chains and specific to how you deal with a federal agency, right? And SBOMs and all of that. So that's going to drive some of this stuff. So understanding how to apply something in different contexts is going to become really important. And so learning how to problem solve, learning how to understand why things are being done the way they are, not just the nuts and bolts on how do I do a parameterized query, but why am I doing it, right? That's going to be, I think, the key thing for them in being able to then bring that to other areas. And so when I talk to my own kids, it's always about skills and networking, skills and networking. When I talk to students, that's where focus on your own skills, but then build your network at the same time, because you're not going to know everything. And you're going to need other people, like Robin said, to put other parts of the bicycle together, and so all of that. So it's a big challenge, but all of that comes into play.
Yeah, Robin.
I just want to speak about, the systems that we work inside of and the systems that we build. I'm continuously looking at problems and regulations that are designed to prevent the negative events that that problem represents. And when you use a system and you say, do it because of regulation, that's a very ineffective system. So telling a developer, do it because we require an SBOM, or do it because in the SBOM we have to ensure that all system vulnerabilities, while saying we have to clear all the system vulnerabilities, that's not difficult to appreciate. But when you get down to why this vulnerability, you need to talk about the problem, because if you can get a development team to see the extended architecture and understand how they're going to use a third-party data source, or understand where their information is going to traverse, or how, when the end user gets this, what they might be able to do with it, you're really talking about problems. And then the developer doesn't need to know all of the executive orders, although Rob, I love that you do. I love the conversations that we have, because specificity is my love language. However, the developer doesn't need that. They need to know what we're concerned that could happen. And then we need to tag to them what they need to know and do. And so again, that comes back to the environment that you're working in, and the experts that you bring to bear in building that environment that you're working in, and focusing on the problems, not the regs. Thanks.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yep, all good. So I think there are some interesting things that came up, and for those that might be interested, my good friend Jay Ryan actually recommended a book called Range. For those that might be interested, it talks about this type of stuff where you kind of think laterally. You don't focus on just becoming skilled in one area, but the ability to transfer that knowledge into multiple contexts, and you abstract away what the problem is. Anyway, for those that might be interested, you might want to take a look at that. Moving on to the last on this. Tony, you there?
Tony is here. By the way,
Hey, Tony, can you hear me? Yep.
I can hear you just fine. Can everyone else hear me?
Yep.
Altaz, I think you may be having a little connection problem on your network.
Oh, sorry about
Probably
that.
a denial of service attack that someone is inflicting upon you. And if not,
My
maybe you
apologies.
should all consider doing that. Training doesn't create a culture of security. There's no question about that. But something we have to remember. A lot of people that are specifying this kind of training and education, and I think they're a little different, tend to either be architects or executives. A developer thinks differently than an architect does, and thinks differently than a business executive does. So an important part of communication is understanding who you're communicating to. So developers want to be really good at what they do. And we blissfully say DevSecOps and assume that developers will magically become security people. Oh, and by the way, they'll pick up all the characteristics of a site reliability engineer too, because we put up the DevSecOps poster in their cubicle or something. That ain't how it is. So yes, you need to create a culture, but it needs to be a culture that is consumed by people in that culture, be they developers, be they SREs, be they testers or whatever. So it's not just training, it's coaching is another really important part of it. Accessibility of the security experts who spend their time not being superior, but being partners.
Yeah, sounds good. I see something that came in again through the Q&A pod here. Can you talk about how executives and leaders should learn their part to promote a culture of security? So this is more of a top-down discussion. Ihan, you have a lot of discussions with senior executives in organizations. Can you talk a little bit about building a security culture from an executive's perspective and what they need to do? What's their part in all of this?
Sure. Altaz, the key to successful leadership is influence, not the authority. Authority is given, however, the influence and control is taken always, right? And one of the best way to influence the kind of just to the people is to make them feel important by involving them the kind of just to the decision-making process, right? You know that the good old saying over there, tell me and I forget, teach me, I may remember, involve me, I will learn, right? Same thing applies for the security, right? And think about if I kind of just do the one size fits all approach to the fashion, right? If there were to kind of just do only one approach, we would kind of just do the wear that a single size of clothes, same color, etc. Right? It doesn't work that way. Same thing for the training as well. This is not going to kind of just sort of fit into that, right? So you need to involve those people to kind of just to decide what the training content is going to look like over there. My background is in development, and Rob and also Tanya, rest assured, this is not happening at IBM. I worked at IBM as well. But while I was working as a developer, one day they said, hey, we are going to kind of just provide a training on the newest JavaScript technology, and we are going to use that one in the product, in the software that we will be kind of just developing all together. Next day, we were in the training. To my surprise, kind of to the half of the organization, not only the developers, even the kind of just the cleaning lady was there, right, in that training over there. And it turned out after 5 hours training that we cannot apply the kind of just the JavaScript technology that they kind of just did teach us over there, right? So the planning is as crucial. The failing to plan is as planning to fail, right? If we are not kind of involving the right, the stakeholders, if someone on top is just kind of just deciding which kind of just training will be provided, that you may not kind of just find the benefit on those kind of just things as well.
Yeah.
And speaking from the security culture as well, although the training is as part of it, but there are many other kind of just the ingredients to that culture, like the leadership commitment is extremely important. Again, I hear that more and more kind of just compliance is needed. Yes, of course, this is needed, but the training is more than that kind of just satisfying those compliance needs over there, right? Leadership commitment needs to be there to say that, hey, guys, training is as important, right? And we will kind of just support you in every way, so that you can kind of just to get to the knowledge to protect the assets that we are entrusting you, right?
Yeah. And I mean, Rob, you also do a lot of stuff with executives and trying to get them to at least initiate this type of program. Have you found that there are certain things where it isn't just about the operational execution teams that need to come in, but there has to be something from an executive's perspective to help foster this kind of momentum? Because otherwise it fizzles, right? So I don't know.
Right.
Your thoughts?
Right. I mean, the best models are, top down and bottom up going simultaneously, right? So you get both kind of ends of the spectrum working together. But some really good examples in this, and we want to provide information that's going to help people. Jennifer Sapniewski at Target, and I mentioned Larry Masseron before, both have done exceptional jobs in this space of helping to build out that culture. Jennifer is at Target. She has a whole security ninjas program that is actually now highly sought after. It's a competitive position inside Target to be a part of that team. So really love the work that she's done in that space, and she's presented at RSA. And so, you can go into more detail on how they do that and some of the metrics. But the key thing around it is making security valuable to everybody, right? And so if you're a individual developer, if you're writing secure code and that's getting delivered to production, you're actually building trust for your organization. And so connecting some of those dots to how you influence that, not just, hey, you're helping us to prevent breaches, but you're also helping us to provide confidence. And, some of those things, and understanding that helps. The other thing I would say in this space too, and I love what Ihan was talking about with influence, right? And instead of trying to impress upon people, but actually influencing them instead, if your organization is in the habit of making exceptions for your executives based on security policies, that is a recipe for disaster, right? The do as I say, not as I do model does not work in this space. So if you're going to tell developers, hey, we can't give you root access on your box, don't do that for your CEO for his laptop, right? Those kinds of things. Make sure that those policies and those mandates that are applied to folks are applying all the way down, all the way through. We're all adhering to, if there's a minimum standard, we're all adhering to that, because you lead by example, right? People are going to do what you do, not what you say. So that would be the other thing in there.
Yeah, I know, Robin, you're a big proponent of working by integrity and making sure that you're able to lead. So in the GRC space, a lot of executives are interested in GRC. It helps drive decisions, particularly when we talk about security. From your experience, are there things you can share about how executives can get involved and just going in, understanding what the expectations might be for them to behave or act or do certain things? Any thoughts, any wisdom that you can share around that?
Well, I have thoughts. I can't promise it's wisdom, but first I do need to say, see her? I am a security ninja. So I just want to come back to something that I hear in the panel that I really like, which is that these are people who are thinking about the problem rather than the mandate. And from a GRC perspective, when a GRC is done well, absolutely no one knows they're doing it. Because at the end of the day, a GRC is about everyone being able to find each other and work, in a risk model and a prioritization model with a degree of transparency and visibility and metrics gathering that allows everyone to focus on their role and their job. So I think one of the main reasons that GRC projects fail, and I have had probably at least a minute with all the major failures in the last 40 years. That's not a fair number because it's really a 30-year-old thing. But even before that, when it was just decision support systems, it's because people misunderstood what each individual's role is and how the GRC impacts them means that you understand what they need to do and you're simply going to allow them to keep doing their job, but you're going to build out this infrastructure around them that adds the transparency, the metrics, the visibility, and the opportunities to get information, get the right information. I want to plug the RMF because it's so valuable and absolutely everybody isn't using it. So the risk management framework that sits in front of everything that is NIST, absolutely everything, begins by saying, here are 22 roles in the organization, and here are a set of tasks that each of those roles must do. And then it breaks out, these are the problems that these people need to solve. And regardless of the framework you're going to use, these things really don't change very much. I didn't used to lean on the RMF for things like SOC 2s and SOX reporting. I didn't because I thought, well, that's really just for government frameworks. But that was a mistake. And about 5 years ago, I realized that and I shifted to RMF first. And it made my life RMF first, plus categorize your problems. Not the solutions, not the flavors of code, not the laws. Categorize your problems first. And, it fits very well with risk. At the top of the triangle, you go to the bottom, you're at the policy level, you hit configuration, you hit assessment, but at the top, the most heavy point of the triangle is always the risk. So even though we think about it as managing risk, I don't agree that that's the most important thing in the AppSec world. I think the most important thing is the problem, because not everybody is geared towards the biggest risk, but everybody is concerned with problems. And when you look at data privacy, last plug on making sure everybody feels like they're excited about their education. There is so much to learn in AI, ML, and NLP right now. It is such an exciting time for data science. So I think to keep people in their seats and not worry so much that they're going to be poached, we need to let people feel excited about what they're learning, understand the social impacts of what they're going to be able to do because of the problems that they're going to be able to prevent or solve. Okay, thanks.
That's wonderful. And we're coming up to the end of this webinar session here today. We've had a lot of different perspectives on things, some agreement, some alignment, some where we've even got divergence on thoughts and opinions, which is very healthy. So hopefully for those that have attended today's session or those that will be seeing the recorded session, it will give you some idea of the range of thoughts that are in this space. And really being able to align that with what the business needs are, aligning that with what the developers' needs are, looking at this thing really from a problem-centric perspective, trying to make it so that people understand why they're doing things that they're doing. These are all important aspects to consider. So we've got 5 points here for you to think about. And that kind of brings us to the end of our discussion. But I do invite you at any point in time, please don't hesitate. If you want to reach out to anyone that's essentially on this panel today, feel free. You can connect on LinkedIn. You can do things, through Twitter or direct message or things like that. Feel free to do so. Just kind of bringing us back to where we are in this discussion today. If you've got any questions and you want to reach out to Security Compass as well, feel free. There's our website. We're more than happy to have a discussion with you on this topic. I'd like to thank our panelists very much for their discussion today, just offering their insights and their thoughts. Thank you to everyone that attended the session and took time out of your busy schedule. Thank you as well to those of you that are going to view this as a recording. Please, let's keep this conversation going. Let's participate as a community to help us move this discussion forward and talk about how we can improve the practice of AppSec security training. Thanks everyone for your time. Have yourselves a safe and a pleasant day. Thank you.
Thanks.